Hey, what's going on, everybody? This is Tyrone back with Tech Life. Great article here from Mike over at Live Reading. I'll leave a link to it in the description so you guys could check it out. So, a big question that he's asking in the title, and I am starting to have that same question and concern. Not necessarily that it's coming from Verizon, but really as an industry overall. So, the question is Verizon kicking off a wireless price war? So, promotional offerings are getting increasingly aggressive in the U.S. wireless industry. Now Verizon, with its efforts, seems to be maybe starting a price war, right? I got to agree here. And the reason I say I got to agree is because what else is left? I mean, the carriers at this point are pretty much copying each other, right? If one carrier does something that might be considered innovative, like Verizon starting new and existing customers can trade in their broken phones, any condition, Samsung, Galaxy, Google, Apple, and they can get, the same amount of value, right, as a new phone. So, or as a phone that's not broken. So that was successful for Verizon, right? And then what happened? T-Mobile started to do it, and now AT&T is doing it to a certain extent. So they're just kind of copying each other. And then if one does 1,200, the next will up it to 1,200 if they start seeing their port outs increase because of that. And then if one does this, the other will do this, right? But now it's closer than ever before in terms of what the offerings are. It's not a huge differentiator anymore. T-Mobile does price lock. Now Verizon is doing price lock for 3 years. Certain things that T-Mobile is still doing is different in a way. Like, for example, Verizon and AT&T do 36-month financing. T-Mobile does 24. But as I've stated in the video yesterday, with tariffs going the way that they are, how beneficial is 24 months for T-Mobile? They might have to go to 48 months. And so maybe we'll have Verizon and AT&T might have to do the same. So the only thing left next to compete for customers is to start a price war. T-Mobile kind of sort of already started it for single line customers. They dropped their price on their highest end plans for single line customers. But where else can you really cut? The industry is expensive. The wireless network is expensive to maintain and operate. Equipment is likely going to get more expensive with these tariffs. Where else can you cut? The carriers themselves have made it as clear as they possibly can that if you want to spend less, you want to save, you have to go to our MVNO and prepaid brands. I mean, just looking at the price difference and how good of an access that you can now get on an MVNO and a prepaid player, I mean, they're making it clear as day, in my opinion. But people are still choosing in the hundreds of thousands to switch to a postpaid carrier every quarter. You have a lot of cheaper plans out there with great network access. You got Mobile X, you got Visible, you got Mint Mobile if you're T-Mobile, you got Straight Talk, you name it, it's out there. Even Boost on the postpaid side is competing in that value segment price point because they want to be disruptive. So a price war is next. But here's the thing, though, and it's not even really talked about much in this article. What does that even look like? What does a price point look like? A price war even look like in the wireless industry, right? We haven't even discussed that. A price war could be promotionally going up in more credits given out. Is that a possibility? Or are we talking about really just cutting price on the plans themselves? Like if it's, I don't know, for the top plan, right, for 4 lines, if it's $55 a line, can we now go down to 45 or 40? Is that next in terms of competing for customers? Because something's got to give. At some point, one carrier is going to try something to start the switching pool, right? And I anticipate that carrier to be T-Mobile. If the switching pool is going to be that slow where T-Mobile still grows the most, but it's not as significant of type of growth that they're used to, they might be the first ones to pull the trigger. And they kind of sort of hinted at that with dropping the price point for single line customers on the Go 5G Next and Go 5G Plus. They're hinting at that, right? They're trialing to see what that does for the business. It's not something that they'll probably keep permanent, I don't think, but they're just seeing, okay, if I drop this by $5, if I drop this by $5, what is it going to do for the bottom line? How much additional growth can I bring in? They're looking at it. The 55 and over, they're looking at those too, right? That's another price point that's cheaper, and they're trying to segment that and see how much more growth they can get. But what does that even look like, right? Not really discussed in the article. So I want to ask you guys, what do you guys think? I'm sure everybody's happy with a lower price point. You know, that's nobody's going to turn that down. Not one customer is going to turn on a cheaper price point, right? But Verizon has been doing it with loyal customers, right? So giving like $10 off per month for a year, right? Verizon has been doing that as a loyalty. But who knows? Who really knows what a price war even looks like? I don't know what that looks like. You guys don't know what that really looks like. Nobody really knows. We can speculate, we can guess what it may look like, but at the end of the day, we really won't know, right? So until one of the carrier or carriers makes a move. So, and what type of degree of a slowdown do we have to get to for the carriers to even consider that? That's something else, right? If there's still kind of sort of healthy growth, right? If T-Mobile's still able to do a 700, 800,000 a quarter, are they really going to start looking at a pricing war, right? But I think the carriers are just looking at it from a standpoint of, okay, I've done this, I've done that, right? And then if I do this and do that, AT&T is just going to do the same. And then if it's effective enough, then T-Mobile will do the same. If T-Mobile does something that's like, oh snap, my port outs to T-Mobile are increasing, then AT&T and Verizon will just respond. So at some point, a pricing war is inevitable, right? That's what this article is saying. But then again, a pricing war is a race to the bottom, because if one drops price, the other will drop price to respond. And then that's good for the consumer, but what does that do for the business, right? What does that do for free cash flow, CapEx, capital investment into more spectrum, more towers, more small cells, right? All of that has to be considered when you talk about a pricing war, right? So it's crazy to say, but 3 strong competitors, we might now be in a topic of a pricing war. Right before, nobody really paid attention much to T-Mobile and Sprint in regards if you're AT&T and Verizon. Remember, they didn't really pay attention much. If T-Mobile they kept doing their uncarrier moves. Verizon and AT&T did respond a little bit, right? They brought unlimited back. They brought phone financing. We understand that, right? But other than that, they didn't really respond much. Like they weren't like super aggressive towards T-Mobile. T-Mobile continued to grow, and AT&T and Verizon were fine with that. Sprint, nobody even looked at Sprint. Sprint was doing free stuff, discounts. You can get our employee discount if you're a consumer. None of that worked at that time, right? But T-Mobile was the most aggressive in growth. They were disruptive. They had a somewhat semi-decent network, and it worked. It got them customers. But now T-Mobile is at scale. They're able to take enterprise if they go lower, right? Because they have the network now. They're able to take small business, big business, government accounts. The VA was a perfect example. So Verizon and AT&T can't ignore that anymore. They have to engage now in the market overall. Before, they were kind of just going back and forth. I remember the Verizon CEO going to conferences and says, well, we're in a swinging contest with AT&T, and then the CEO of AT&T at the time said the same thing. We're kind of going back and forth with Verizon, never really mentioning T-Mobile or Sprint. But now you just cannot ignore T-Mobile. You can't. You cannot ignore them. There's too much at stake for these companies to lose. They can lose serious business accounts to T-Mobile. T-Priority, they just got New York City. You just can't sit still. You can't do it. You have to engage now in the competition. But let me know your thoughts in the comments. Let me know if you think a pricing war is even reasonable or will it be effective. Let us know in the comments. Like, share, subscribe. See y'all in the next one. Peace.